Chang'e, Goddess of the Moon. A prequel to the Daughter of the Moon Goddess, reimagining the legend of Chang'e flying to the moon in the world of the Celestial Kingdom. Chrysanthemums were flowering in the courtyard, their slender petals curved in rich purples, yellows, and reds. Above, the trees were losing their coats of green, donning jeweled shades of amber and garnet. A coolness infused the air, refreshing my senses. Autumn was almost upon us, my favorite time of year. Yet there was little delight in the beauty that abounded now as I faced my husband's grim countenance. "You must see another physician, Chang'e," he insisted, pulling his stool closer to mine. "No, Ho-Yi, what good will it do? I've heard enough of their dire predictions." My voice was faint, laden with fatigue. When was the last time I had felt well? "Then I will bring them to you." He spoke calmly despite the worry that creased his face. An awkward silence fell between us too often of late, both of us searching for the words to bring the other around, neither willing to listen. My arms wrapped instinctively around the rounded curve of my stomach. A soft kick landed against my palm, a shiver of delight running through me, even as I dreaded what would come. Our child, our great joy, had become something ominous to be cautioned against. I was sick of the way the physicians shook their head as they felt my pulse and examined my body. Had they whispered to my husband, casting sidelong glances my way like I was some witless creature unable to handle their harsh prognosis. As if my body were not my own, that I had no part in this, even as it was me who bore the weight of their judgment, the dangers they prophesied with such callous ease. The warnings had grown more dire of late, the complications of my situation, the risk that my child and I might die. And I was frightened. How could I not be? Death, once a stranger, was now a constant presence in my mind. I turned aside, hiding my face from my husband's watchful stare. Ashamed to speak aloud my terrors, to confess how each diagnosis sapped a little of hope I clung to. What would he understand of such despair and fears? He was a hero, the most valiant of mortals. He had faced death 100 times and emerged the victor. His praises were written in books and sung in the tea-houses. Gifts to honor him arrived in a steady stream each day, most of which he turned away, whether chests of gold, jade trinkets, or rare artifacts. He told me once the only treasure he'd ever wanted was for us to be a family, to be together until the end of our days. Yearning crept across my heart. Once I'd imagined this dream securely in our grasp, until the nightmares had begun, the fear for my child and me. My mind shifted as though shielding itself from these thoughts that might drive me mad. There was one gift Ho-Yi had kept, the elixir of immortality, bestowed on him by the gods for slaying the sunbirds that had been destroying our world. He'd been lauded for the victory, yet killing those birds had cost him greatly, taking something from him of immeasurable worth. He tried to conceal it, but I knew him almost as well as myself. It was no light matter to slay a divine creature, one beloved by the gods. Despite the clarity of his purpose, for what choice did he have but to kill them? My husband had changed since that day. In the weeks that followed, he seemed on edge, as though waiting for something to happen, for a price to be demanded for his actions. Yet what harm could the sunbirds do now they were dead? Just one remained, sworn to peace, my husband had claimed. No god had descended to strike my husband in retaliation, nor had any great calamity befallen him since. Perhaps I was making too much of this, I assured myself, even as unease jostled my insides. No childbirth was without danger. Such fears were natural to be expected, not a premonition. Most certainly nothing to do with the immortal lives my husband had taken that day. He had even been rewarded by the gods. Yet this elixir was as much a curse as a boon, the knowledge rankling even as it comforted. For if it were known what we possessed, a storm of unrest would be unleashed upon us. Kings and lords, thieves and villains, would clamor to seize it, and we would undoubtedly earn the enmity of those who failed. The emperor himself would demand its surrender, and how could we defy his command? No mortal, no matter how strong, revered, or blessed, could withstand such forces at all once. The choice that lay before us was stark in its simplicity: to consume the elixir or conceal it forever. When Hoyi had first shown it to me, I'd asked, "Will you take the elixir?" How my heart had pounded, a part of me flinching for the inevitable sorrow of parting. Who could refuse eternity? Much less he who faced mortality every day on the battlefield, who had witnessed countless times the fragility of our lives, and how easily it might be ended through an unlucky tumble, the swift flight of an arrow, a strike of the blade. He had shaken his head, taking my hand. "There is only enough for one. I will never leave you, my beloved." I believed him, for I could not bear the thought of leaving him either. Only the two of us knew where the elixir was kept, tucked in a hidden compartment under our bed. We barely spoke of it for fear of another overhearing, even in the quiet of our home. And so the secret festered in silence, that of the jade bottled stopper with gold, the key to eternal life, to power beyond one's dreams. A secret nestled beneath our bodies when we slept, an unseen divide between us where once there was none, a weight upon our hearts and minds, unspoken but never forgotten. The elixir. What shall we do with it? I asked now, bracing myself, for he did not like to speak of it. Perhaps it reminded him of what he had forsaken. "Why are you thinking of this?" He frowned, shaking his head. "Chang'e, do not worry yourself over such things. You will not die. You will be safe and well, as will our child. We are seeing the physicians to find out as much as we can. I won't let anything happen to you." His expression hardened, turning forbidding. Another foe might have quailed and fled, yet what could frighten? Death. "Do you ever think about taking the elixir?" I repeated my question of old, refusing to be diverted, wanting to be assured. "Not without you. Never without you," he said without pause. His answer gladdened me. It should have been enough. However, my treacherous mind demanded more, wandering again to the ceaseless realm of uncertainty. Perhaps he sensed my disquiet, for he lowered his head to mine as he murmured, "I will seek out another elixir, and then we will take it together. Would you like that, for us to live forever in the heavens?" The light in his eyes was both bright and resolute. What might be an empty words from another was a pledge from him. Forever with the one I loved most. It seemed too much, too greedy to want such a thing, an impossible dream, but that was why dreams were often more enticing than reality. "What if you never find a second one?" I asked. A slow smile spread across his face. "Then we will grow old together, surrounded by our children and grandchildren. We will savor each moment of our life well spent." Those words banished the uneasy stirrings of my heart. His hands moved to cover mine, his thumb stroking my palm with his deliberate measure. A melting warmth rippled through my veins. I turned my hand over, clutching him, pulling him closer. He let himself fall toward me. I was no match for his strength, should he resist. His body pressing mine with delicious weight, his lips dropped to my neck, sliding up to my cheek, tantalizingly close to my lips. My breath caught, all worry forgotten, as he clasped me to him with enthralling urgency yet tenderness. What was eternity to love? To be held by him this way, like I was the only person who mattered in the world, to feel this fullness in my chest, to have him beside me as we lay in our bed, all this was worth more than 10 lifetimes. The harsh glare of morning woke me the next day, sunlight falling upon my face. I had forgotten to close the curtains the night before. I raised myself up at an elbow, the ever-present weight of our child pressing against me. My husband was already dressed, his hair slicked into a top knot. I preferred it loose against his shoulders, or even tied part way. He looked ready for battle now, solemn and grave. "Come, Chang'e," he held out his hand. "The physician's hall will be open soon." I don't want to go. While I would have usually conceded to his will in matters he felt strongly about, this was my body, my life, our child. He did not drop his hand. "This time will be different. We must not give up." I bit back a refusal, resentment flickering within at how easily he disregarded my concerns. Deep in my heart something fractured, the barest crack, yet it now marred the surface of what was once whole. Why did Hou-Yi not listen? Perhaps it was his nature, always searching for a way or an answer that pleased his ears, that aligned with his sense of rightness. Some might call it arrogance. If so, it was his due as the finest general in the realm, the great warrior who had saved the world. He was accustomed to bending fate to his whim, dragging it to heel. His resolve was one of the reasons I loved him, and also what drove me to my wits' end now. The physician would offer the same opinion as all the ones before. I knew this as surely as I could scent rain in the air as when I had first sensed I was with child. While I possessed neither training nor experience to guide me, this prickle of foreboding was answer enough. A helplessness engulfed me. It was too late. I was already snared in the web, despair swelling through me at the thought. Yet I bent my head in assent, sliding my hand through his. As I could no longer walk long distances in my condition, Hou-Yi helped me into the waiting sedan chair with such gentleness. I ached within, even as a kernel of anger hardened in my chest. Sleep eluded me that night, and when it finally came, it was a violent churn of terror, my insides twisting taut. I cried out as my eyes flew open. Darkness enveloped me in a suffocating sheath. My hand stretched across the bed, reaching for the comfort I already knew was not here. I was alone. Hou-Yi had gone again to serve the king. Was it unrest by the border, a dangerous enemy, or some fearsome beast? I had forgotten the reason he was called away this time. There had been so many of late they bled into one another like paint into paper. My fingers trailed the delicate gold chain looped around my neck, brushing the jade pendant carved with the dragon. A gift from my husband. An amulet for protection was all he had told me, reluctant to elaborate. Was it some trinket he had purchased upon a whim, swindled by some quick-talking merchant, preying upon a moment of weakness? Regardless, I treasured it as I did all he had given me. A sharp burst of pain wrenched my insides, erupting in brutal force. My hands fell to the bed, digging into the sheets as I gasped, struggling for breath. A warm wetness streaked down my legs, slippery and slick. I looked down, freezing at the sight of dark rivulets seeping through my white robe, soaking the bedding beneath. Terror flooded me. I could not move. Too early. It was much too early. There should be more than a month left, which meant my child was in danger, as was I. Another wave of pain slammed into my body. My crying splintered into ragged moans. There was no answering shout of concern, no footsteps pounding toward me in haste. The attendants were gone for the night, and I had given our housemaid leave to visit her ailing father. Hou-Yi would have been furious. He had ordered that I not be left alone, but I had thought there was time yet. I would be safe. Now I was trapped in my room with the closest physician over half a mile away, in our large house, set among these vast gardens. Who would hear my cries? I had feared death all my life. Any mortal would be lying if they claimed otherwise. But this was the first time I faced it. If I died tonight, alone, I would not even have a chance to bid my beloved husband farewell. I was not brave or valiant as Hou-Yi. I could not hide my feelings behind a mask of calm. I was shaking all over, my tears mingling with the sweat that slid down my face. Broken gasps squeezed from my chest. Such fear filled me. Death was terrifying enough, without the added anguish of knowing it would take my child too. I had not held or seen my child, but they were a part of me. This bond between us of flesh and blood was forged pure and unbreakable. A surge of protectiveness rose through the shuddering fear, hardening into a core of iron. A single thought surfaced with blazing clarity. I would not let my child die, not while there was another way. I would fight for us. Agony tore through me, sharp and merciless, snapping my resolve. My mind went blank, the pains coming swifter, the last lull barely a respite. Guttural sounds choked from my throat as a crushing sense of doom sank over me. Teeth gritted, legs stretched taut, I pounded the mattress with my fists, praying for the hurt to subside, for someone, anyone, to come to my aid. There was only silence. I shoved myself from the bed, staggering to my feet, forcing myself to move. If I could make it to the courtyard, I might be able to draw someone's attention. Despair makes dreamers of us, yet this spark of hope pushed me onward. As I stumbled past the table, pain speared me again. My limbs buckled as I fell to the floor. My eyes darted to the bed, its crumpled sheets stained with blood, my mind whispering of what else was hidden there beneath our bed. The elixir. It would save us. The only thing in the world that could. I shrank from the thought. The elixir wasn't mine to take. I had not killed the sunbirds. I had not earned this prize. It belonged to my husband, who had turned his back on immortality because of me. I had been glad then, relieved at his decision. How could I now think of stealing it? How could I betray him? I was vile indeed to consider such a thing. Yet how could I not, with death hovering over me? Hoyi always said one couldn't give up, I reminded myself. When life was at stake, one should snatch at any advantage, for there was no return from death. He would want this. He always said I was more precious to him than anything in the world. Persuasive words, memories conveniently plucked and reshaped to soothe the rumblings of my conscience. When death was at hand, one's true character showed like a reflection in a mirror. I was a selfish coward. I did not want to die. And yet it was not just for me but for our child. I would not let us succumb to this fate. The pain faded, allowing a moment's lucidity. There was a little time to waste. The agony would return, a relentless tempest. I pushed myself to my feet. There was a new alacrity to my movements, an invigorating rush in my veins. Somehow I found the strength to whip away the blood-stained covers, dropping them where they pooled by my feet. With both hands, I tugged at the heavy mattress until it slid to the floor. There it was, tucked in the far corner of the bed frame amid the carved lotuses and mandarin ducks. I ran my fingers along the wood until they felt a shift in the grain, the thinnest crack. I pulled, but it did not yield. Digging my nails in, I yanked again with all my might. It gave way, a small wooden compartment coming away in my palm, containing a small bottle within. In the dark, the jade shimmered, its honeyed fragrance whispering of release from the shackles of torment. Pain reared once more, gouging at my insides. The child stirred, kicking at the walls of my belly. Did they feel the anxiety pounding through my veins, the doubt and guilt that assailed me? Or did they sense my hesitation and were urging me to save them? It was easier to believe the latter as I pried away the stopper from the bottle. A shimmer of gold dust wafted into the air as a rich fragrance sprang forth like I was in an orchard of peach trees. The scent streaked through my nostrils, down my throat, my mouth watering with a sudden ravenous hunger. What about Hoyi? Part of me still clung to what was right and honorable, the soundless voice within now frayed with despair. How could you do this? Don't you love him? My hand stilled midway in lifting the bottle. I do love him, I whispered aloud. More than anyone. Liar. My conscience chided me. Else you wouldn't be doing what you are now. I should have corked the bottle, returned it to its hiding place, replaced the covers and waited my fate, the one the gods had marked for me. Better to face that end than spend eternity regretting my treachery, than to betray the one I loved. But I would not. I would do this for me. I would do this for my child. I would grasp life, plunging into unknown waters, praying I'd make it to shore. My hand was shaking as I tipped the elixir into my mouth. Warm liquid spilled onto my tongue, the acrid bitterness jolting my senses as I suppressed the instinctive urge to gag. I love him. I will never love another, I whispered to myself as I placed a protective palm over my stomach. But I choose us. I closed my eyes and swallowed. As the last of the elixir slid down my throat, a coldness spread through me like I had fallen into snow, my pains dissipating. In its place coursed a tingling, glittering energy. I stared at my hands, catching the light gleaming through the seams at my fingertips, streaking across lines in my palms, rippling through my veins. Such radiance flooded my vision, illuminating me from within. A glow enveloped my skin like a lantern whose candle had been lit, that of the moon emerging from behind a cloud. My body went limp, a heartbeat before it was swung up into the air, snared by some tangling, all-encompassing force. I struggled, dread pinning me, for I could no longer control my limbs, unable to wrench free of its hold. Not this way, I thought frantically, not without a chance to explain or leave a letter for my husband to return to our empty home to wonder the worst. Though what I did tonight was more terrible than anything he could ever have conceived. My vision blurred, tears springing into my eyes. I groped at the air as my feet were thrust through the windows, their panels springing apart. I scrambled to find something to hold on to, my fingers clutching at the splintered frame. But I was torn away with the effortless ease of blowing seeds from a dandelion, the stained silk of my robes twisting and fluttering in the wind. Chang'e! At his powerful cry, my heart both soared and plunged. His voice was at once so familiar and beloved, yet now it scalded my ears as I burned with shame. I was a thief caught in the act, my selfish nature laid bare. He had returned too late. Had I been too impatient, driven mindless by fear, or perhaps deep down a part of me had coveted the elixir all along? My skin was glazed with sweat as I clenched the impulse to look away. I would return his gaze, accept any justly deserved recrimination. I hungered, too, for this last sight of him, standing by the window, his armor gleaming by the light of the heavens. His head was bare, his black hair coiled into a topknot, eyes wide with shock, sorrow mirrored in the dark pupils, and a flicker of something else. Was it disappointment? Or even hate? As his hand stretched toward me, a new pain impaled my heart, one that left wounds unseen, those that would never heal. His eyes narrowed, his mouth thinned as he raised his bow. Was he furious enough to shoot me? But then he lowered his weapon almost at once. I cried out his name, a plea for forgiveness. Yet he could not hear me, my sobs swallowed by the howling wind. The child within kicked as though sharing my despair. I clasped my hands over my stomach in a vain attempt to soothe them. A strange energy thrummed through my body, yielding a new strength. My aches and pains, all that was flawed and broken in my mortal state, was gone like snow covering the muddied earth, water smoothing the pitted sands. Yet there was no joy or relief, just the bitterest of remorse. I stared at my husband until, at last, he vanished from sight. Grief seared me for what we had lost, my betrayal sliding between my ribs like a knife. As tears streamed down my face, I forced myself to turn from my home, for it was mine no more. I was no longer mortal. My heart did not lighten, sunken beneath a new burden, one that formed the moment I took the elixir. Yet my child and I were safe, at least for now. I could not regret this choice, no matter the cost. I still had our child, to whom I would be a father and mother. And as I gazed unto the horizon, aglitter with stars, incandescent with the light of the moon, so full and perfect tonight, I vowed to make a new life for us, wherever we were. This would not be the end of our story. We would survive, and together we would face what would come. How clearly I remembered my ascent to the skies. After all, I have relived this every day since I came here, since I became immortal. The mortals worshipped me, though I did nothing to deserve it. On the 15th day of the 8th lunar month, they laid out their offerings, murmuring prayers over the fragrant incense smoke that spiraled to the heavens. The moon goddess, they called me, but was there ever a goddess as powerless? When the mortals sang songs to me, I wondered what they truly thought. Many believed I had betrayed my husband. Some imagined me as the unworthy wife to a hero, thinking Hoyi deserved better. How I missed him! A ruthless warrior, and yet a tender and loving husband. He would have been a good father to our daughter, a girl who possessed his fierce spirit. To our other children, perhaps those who might have taken after me instead. Children who were lost to us in this lifetime, children we would never have. My heart curled with a familiar ache. I welcomed it, a relentless reminder that I had not forgotten him. Immortality was a hollow gift, regret poor company for a broken heart. Yet I cannot curse the elixir that saved me, for it had saved our daughter too, Xingyin, named for the stars in the sky, the eternal companion to the moon. If the mortals doubted my honor in silence, their celestial majesties denounced me as scheming, selfish, treacherous, unworthy of immortality. This remote place they exiled me to was a wilderness to them, the one accidental act of benevolence bestowed upon me. I did not like being bound here, but I was grateful to find wonder and beauty in this place. To have Pinger by my side, more friend than an attendant, she stayed with me willingly when few would have wanted to serve a disgraced mistress. There was even solace in my endless task of lighting the lanterns, a way to silence my mind, to relive the memories I never wanted to forget. I did not complain about my punishment. I accepted it readily, and there were days I felt I deserved worse. Each night I performed my tasks with diligence until my arms and back ached and my fingers were blackened with soot. The nights of the full moon were the hardest. 1,000 lanterns in all needed to be lit. Pinger had offered to teach me what magic she knew, but I had no talent in it. Attempting to channel my powers plunged me into such exhaustion it seemed a futile exercise. What need was there for magic? I had lived long enough without it. While it might hasten my task, time knew no bounds here. It was a fitting part of my punishment to be powerless goddess. Magic would only remind me of what I had become, all I had lost the day I became immortal. Let this onerous duty be part of my penance. I accepted wholeheartedly. Yet life would not be all misery and grief. I had my daughter, someone to care for, to return to after my labors. In the echoes of her smile I found love again, hope reborn in the brightness of her eyes. No, I had not chosen wrong. We were alive, we had defied our destiny, and as long as we lived there would be hope, that I might see my husband again.